The Caltharian hegemony had ruled the Andromeda Spiral for 3,000 years. Their crystalline ships moved like silver death through the void, carrying the weight of absolute authority across 47 star systems. Emperor Zexton stood on the observation deck of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching the blue-green world of Earth slowly rotate beneath him. Such a small planet, he mused to his war council, his forearms gesturing dismissively at the display. And yet these humans dare to refuse our generous offer of incorporation. General Korthval, his carapace scarred from a dozen conquered worlds, clicked his mandibles in agreement. My Lord Emperor, their technology is primitive. Steam-powered vessels and crude chemical explosives. Our preliminary scans show they have barely achieved flight. They pose no threat to the hegemony. The Emperor's compound eyes reflected the planet's surface. 3 months ago, his diplomatic vessel had descended to Earth's largest population centers with the standard ultimatum: surrender unconditionally and serve the hegemony, or face total annihilation. Every species in recorded history had chosen surrender. Every species except these humans, the response had been unexpected. Instead of cowering leaders begging for mercy, Earth's representatives had stood in their primitive meeting halls and declared something the Caltharians had never heard before. No, get off our planet. Primitive, perhaps, Admiral Vexitara interjected, her voice carrying through the ship's neural network. But their rejection was unanimous across all their tribal nations. Even their smallest settlements sent the same message. Emperor Zextan's mood darkened. The hegemony's expansion had been built on the principle of inevitable surrender. Species saw their overwhelming power and submitted rather than face extinction. But these humans had done something unprecedented. They had united against a common threat. Show them the demonstration, he commanded. The Eternal Dominion moved into high orbit above what humans called the Pacific Ocean. Energy gathered in the ship's primary weapon array, a device capable of cracking continents. A beam of pure destruction lanced down, vaporizing a section of ocean 50 kilometers wide. Steam and radiation clouds billowed upward, visible from orbit. Now transmit our message, the Emperor ordered. They have one solar rotation to reconsider. After that, we begin the cleansing. On Earth's surface, the message reached every radio, every television, every communication device simultaneously. The alien voice spoke in perfect English, Chinese, Russian, Arabic, and dozens of other languages. You have witnessed our power. Submit now or watch your world burn. You have 24 Earth hours. In the United Nations building in New York, Secretary General Maria Santos stared at the smoldering crater that had once been open ocean. The aliens had demonstrated they could destroy Earth with ease. Around the emergency session table, world leaders sat in stunned silence. The death toll from the steam cloud alone will reach the hundreds of thousands, reported the head of emergency response, and that was just a warning shot. President Chen of the Asian Federation spoke first. They're giving us a choice between slavery and death. Some choice, muttered Prime Minister Okafor of the African Union. Santos looked around the room at faces representing 7 billion people. We've seen their ships. Our most advanced fighters can't even reach their lowest vessels. Our nuclear weapons might as well be fireworks to them. Then we surrender? Asked Chancellor Weber of the European Confederation. The room fell silent. Through the windows they could see people gathering in the streets below, holding signs, chanting, refusing to give up hope even in the face of impossible odds. No, said President Jackson of the American states, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. I've spent the last 3 hours on calls with leaders from every nation on Earth, from tiny island nations to major powers. You know what I heard. The same thing over and over. He stood, looking out at the crowds below. Every single leader, representing every government, every people, every culture on this planet, gave me the same answer. We don't surrender. We don't kneel. We fight. Santos felt something she hadn't expected in humanity's darkest hour: pride. Even if we can't win? Especially if we can't win, replied Dr. Petrov from the Russian Republic. My grandfather fought in the Great Patriotic War. He told me something once. Sometimes the only victory available is making sure your enemy remembers the price of defeating you. Above them, the Caltharian fleet waited. 12 capital ships, each one capable of destroying continents. Hundreds of support vessels, fighters, and orbital bombardment platforms. a force that had conquered 47 worlds without losing a single ship. General Harrison, Earth's highest-ranking military officer, activated the global communication network. All units, all nations, all forces. This is Operation Last Stand. We're not fighting to win. We're fighting to show these bastards what humanity means. Across the globe, defense forces mobilized. Ancient missile silos opened, their nuclear arsenals fueled and ready. Fighter squadrons took to the skies, knowing they would never return. Naval vessels moved into formation, their crews understanding they faced an enemy beyond their ability to harm. In orbit, Emperor Zexthon watched the primitive planet's response with amusement. They're actually mobilizing their military forces. How quaint. Should we begin the bombardment early, my lord? Asked General Korthval. No. Let them have their 24 hours. Let them contemplate their choice. When the time comes, we'll make their death swift. The galaxy must see that the hegemony can be merciful, even to the foolishly defiant. But something nagged at Admiral Vextara as she watched the human preparations. In 3,000 years of conquest, she had never seen a species refuse to negotiate, refuse to seek terms, refuse to try saving at least some of their population. These humans seemed determined to make their entire species extinct, rather than submit. My lord, she said carefully, perhaps we should reconsider the terms. Offer them partial autonomy or— Absolutely not. The Emperor's voice cut through the ship's neural network like a blade. The hegemony does not negotiate with primitives. They will submit or they will die. There is no third option. 24 hours ticked by with agonizing slowness. On Earth, final messages were sent, last words spoken, prayers offered in 1,000 languages to 1,000 gods. Humanity prepared to die as they had lived, free. Above them, the Caltharian fleet powered their weapons and prepared to add another world to their empire's list of cautionary tales. The countdown reached zero at precisely 1432, Greenwich Mean Time, on what historians would later call Defiance Day. Emperor Zexithon gave the order with the casual indifference of someone ordering breakfast. Begin the cleansing. Target their population centers first. What happened next would shake the Caltharian hegemony to its foundation. The first wave of bombardment ships descended through Earth's atmosphere, their energy shields glowing like falling stars. Major cities worldwide launched everything they had. Nuclear missiles, conventional rockets, even obsolete surface-to-air systems from wars decades past. The primitive weapons struck the Caltharian shields and exploded harmlessly as expected, but the humans didn't stop. Wave after wave of fighters threw themselves at the alien vessels, their pilots screaming battle cries in dozens of languages as they crashed their aircraft directly into the enemy ships. The shields held, but something unprecedented happened. They flickered. Impossible, Admiral Vextara breathed as she watched the tactical displays. Their weapons cannot penetrate our shields. It's not their weapons, reported the fleet's chief scientist, his crystalline skin pulsing with confusion. It's the cumulative impact. Their shields have no sophisticated targeting. No advanced materials, just kinetic force and crude explosives. But there are so many of them. Below, Air Force Major Sarah Chen guided her damaged F-35 toward a Caltharian bomber, her engines failing and her weapons expended. She thought of her daughter, safe in a bunker somewhere in Colorado, and pushed her throttle forward. Her plane struck the alien vessel's shield at Mach 2, adding one more impact to the thousands already recorded. The bomber's shield generator overloaded. For the first time in 3,000 years of conquest, a Caltharian military vessel lost its protective barrier. Nuclear missiles from ground-based launchers, having been held in reserve for exactly this moment, struck the unshielded craft. The bomber exploded in a brilliant fireball visible from orbit. Report, Emperor Zexthon demanded, his forearms trembling with rage. How did primitives destroy one of our ships? Shield saturation, my lord, the scientist replied hesitantly. They're using their own lives as weapons. Thousands of pilots are deliberately crashing into our vessels. The cumulative damage is overwhelming our defensive systems. On Earth's surface, the news spread like wildfire. Humanity had drawn first blood. Television networks, radio stations, and internet communications carried the same message. We got one. We can hurt them. The effect was electric. In Moscow, submarine crews prepared to launch their entire nuclear arsenal in coordinated strikes. In Beijing, volunteer pilots lined up for suicide missions faster than aircraft could be fueled. In Washington, President Jackson authorized the release of every classified weapon system, no matter how experimental. Use everything, he ordered. Every prototype, every abandoned project, every crazy idea our military has ever tested. If it can fly and explode, put it in the air. Dr. Elena Vasquez, head of the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, activated protocols that had existed only in theoretical documents. Orbital debris was weaponized, industrial satellites reprogrammed as kinetic missiles, and communications satellites turned into improvised bombs. But the most devastating surprise came from an unexpected source. Captain James Morrison had commanded nuclear submarines for 15 years. But he'd never imagined his final mission would be this insane. The USS Virginia surfaced in the North Atlantic, its ballistic missiles armed and ready. His orders were simple. Get close enough to the alien fleet to make the shots count. Sir, his weapons officer reported, we have firing solutions on 3 enemy vessels. Range is extreme but doable. Morrison nodded. Every other submarine in the world's navies was doing the same thing, surfacing in broad daylight, abandoning stealth, and launching everything they had. It was suicide, but it was humanity's best chance. Fire all tubes, he ordered. Across Earth's oceans, hundreds of submarines launched their payloads simultaneously. ICBMs and SLBMs screamed skyward, their nuclear warheads aimed not at targets on the ground, but at the alien fleet in orbit. Most would miss. Most would be destroyed by point defense systems. But some would get through. In space, the Caltharian fleet suddenly found itself under attack from directions they hadn't anticipated. Ship-to-ship combat in their experience involved sophisticated energy weapons and tactical maneuvering. They had never faced an enemy that simply threw nuclear fire at them in massive volleys. Multiple impacts on the Destroyer of Worlds, reported Admiral Vextara. Their ship killers are primitive, but they're using so many that our point defense can't stop them all. The Destroyer of Worlds, a kilometer-long dreadnought, staggered under the impacts of 17 nuclear warheads. Its shields held, but power fluctuations cascaded through its systems. When a wing of human fighters led by Colonel Maria Santos crashed into its forward weapons array, the combined damage was too much. The great ship lost main power. This is insanity, General Korthval transmitted to the flagship. They're using their entire species as ammunition. Every human seems willing to die to damage us. Emperor Zexthon watched the tactical display with growing disbelief. 3 of his ships were crippled, 1 was destroyed, and the humans showed no signs of stopping. In fact, they seemed to be getting more organized, more desperate, more effective. How many of them are there? He demanded. Current population estimates suggest 7 billion individuals, the scientist replied. And they all appear to be participating in this suicide attack. On Earth, the impossible was happening. Humanity was learning. Each attack taught them something new about alien technology. Military commanders shared intelligence in real time, adapting tactics by the hour. When ramming attacks proved effective, more pilots volunteered. When submarine-launched missiles showed promise, more submarines surfaced to fire, but the cost was staggering. Entire air forces had been wiped out. Every major city was under bombardment. Millions were dead, and millions more would die before the day ended. In the Australian outback, Aboriginal elder William Namatjira stood with his grandson, watching alien ships burn in the sky above. The old man had fought in 3 wars, but he'd never seen anything like this. "Grandfather," the boy asked, "are we winning?" William watched a human fighter explode against an alien hull, taking the enemy ship's weapons offline. "No, boy. We're not winning. But we're not losing the way they expected us to. Sometimes that's enough." In the Caltharian fleet, something unprecedented was happening. For the first time in their military history, some officers were beginning to question orders. "My lord," Admiral Vextara transmitted privately to the Emperor, "perhaps we should consider withdrawal, regroup and return with a larger force." The response was immediate and furious. "Withdrawal? From primitives? Never. We will glass this planet and every human on it. The galaxy must know that defying the hegemony leads only to death." But as the day wore on and the losses mounted, even the Emperor began to realize that this conquest was unlike any other. These humans weren't just fighting. They were teaching the galaxy something dangerous. They were proving that even the mightiest empire could bleed. The 3rd day of the war changed everything. By now, half of Earth's military forces were gone, Major cities lay in ruins and the seas glowed with radioactive fire. But something extraordinary was happening in the depths of space. Other species were watching. Kethara huddled in the cargo hold of her smuggling ship, monitoring communications from 40 light-years away. The Zephyrian trader had spent her life avoiding the Caltharian hegemony, but now she couldn't look away from the transmissions coming from the Sol system. "By the 7 moons," she whispered to her crew. "Are you seeing this?" Her pilot, a scarred veteran named Vorthen, nodded grimly. "The humans are still fighting. 3 days of orbital bombardment, and they're still fighting." The communications were chaotic, desperate, but filled with something Kethara had never heard in the voice of a conquered species: defiance. Human broadcasts continued transmitting even as their cities burned, their messages reaching across the galaxy through quantum resonance patterns. "This is Radio Free Earth, broadcasting from the Rocky Mountain Emergency Network. Day 3 of the invasion. We've lost contact with most coastal cities, but resistance continues worldwide. To any alien species receiving this transmission, we are humanity, and we do not surrender." In the hegemony's outer territories, species that had submitted centuries ago heard those words and felt something they'd forgotten: hope. On the planet Xerion, in the industrial sector designated as Zone 7, a Viridian worker named Jorak stopped his assembly line duties to listen. The Viridians had surrendered to the Caltharians without firing a shot, accepting slavery in exchange for their lives. Now, as Jorak heard about a species choosing death over submission, something stirred in his chest that he hadn't felt in 50 years. "Worker Jorak," the overseer's mechanical voice echoed through the factory. "Return to assigned duties." For the first time since the hegemony's arrival, Jorak ignored the order. Other workers around him were stopping too, all listening to the impossible transmissions from Earth. Meanwhile, in the Sol system, humanity's war had evolved beyond anyone's expectations. With most conventional forces destroyed, the surviving humans had become something the Caltharians had never encountered: a species that used innovation born from desperation. Dr. Sandra Kim worked in a bunker laboratory beneath the ruins of Sol, surrounded by physicists, engineers, and military personnel from around the world. Through quantum communication links that somehow kept functioning despite the bombardment, Earth's greatest minds shared ideas at light speed. The alien ships use gravitational manipulation for both propulsion and shielding, she explained to her international team via holographic projection, but their systems have a resonance frequency. "If we can match it..." In London's underground, Professor James Wright nodded excitedly. "Harmonic disruption. But we'd need massive synchronized explosions to generate the right frequency patterns." "We have massive explosions," replied General Harrison from his command bunker in Colorado. "Every remaining nuclear device on the planet. We just need to time them perfectly." Above them, Emperor Zexthan's frustration had turned to rage. What should have been a simple conquest had become a nightmare. 6 of his ships were now crippled or destroyed, and the humans showed no signs of stopping their insane resistance. "Status report," he demanded from Admiral Vextara. "My lord, human resistance has actually intensified. They're coordinating attacks across their entire planet using communication methods we can't intercept. More concerning, our intelligence suggests other species in the outer territories are monitoring this conflict." The Emperor's compound eyes flared. "Other species?" "Yes, my lord. We're detecting increased subspace communications throughout our empire. It appears news of this resistance is spreading." For the first time in his reign, Emperor Zexthan felt something approaching concern. The hegemony's power was built on the myth of inevitability. Every species submitted because they believed resistance was impossible. But these humans were broadcasting their defiance across the galaxy, and worse, they were demonstrating that the mighty Caltharian fleet could be hurt. "Accelerate the cleansing," he ordered. "I want this planet sterilized within the next solar day, before their example spreads further." But it was already too late. In the hegemony's capital system, Emperor Zexthan's own cousin, Admiral Thykon, was having private conversations with trusted officers. As a member of the royal family, Thykon had access to classified intelligence that painted a very different picture of the Empire's stability. "The humans have destroyed or crippled 8 of our ships," he told his inner circle. 8 ships from a force that was supposed to conquer them in hours. "Do you understand what this means?" Captain Velthos, a decorated veteran of 20 conquests, spoke carefully. It means our ships aren't invincible, my lord. Exactly. And if our ships aren't invincible, then our empire isn't eternal. These humans are proving something that every conquered species will hear about. We can be beaten. Back on Earth, the impossible was happening. Humanity's coordinated nuclear strike was ready. Every remaining missile, every submarine-based warhead, every experimental weapon, timed to detonate simultaneously around the alien fleet. The theory was insane. Using nuclear explosions to create gravitational resonance patterns that might disrupt alien technology. T-minus 60 seconds to Operation Frequency, announced the Global Command. Network in bunkers worldwide. The last survivors of humanity's military waited. This was their final gambit. If it failed, Earth would fall. If it succeeded, well, no one was sure what would happen. 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Execute! Across Earth's atmosphere and near orbital space, every remaining nuclear weapon detonated simultaneously. The coordinated explosions created gravitational shockwaves that rippled through local spacetime in precise harmonic patterns. In the Caltharian fleet, every ship's quantum sensors screamed warnings. The gravitational fields holding their vessels together began to fluctuate wildly. Ships that had floated in space for millennia suddenly found themselves fighting to maintain structural integrity. What's happening? Emperor Zexthon demanded as his flagship shuddered around him. Gravitational harmonics, the chief scientist reported in panic. They've somehow matched our field frequencies. Our ships are losing coherence. The Eternal Dominion began to break apart, not from external attack, but from internal structural failure as its own gravitational fields turned against it. Throughout the fleet, similar catastrophes unfolded. The humans had turned the Caltharians' greatest strength, their gravity-based technology, into their greatest weakness. 3 more capital ships shattered like glass sculptures in an earthquake. Hundreds of support vessels lost power as their quantum cores destabilized. In minutes, the mighty hegemony fleet was reduced to debris and fleeing survivors. Admiral Vextara's ship was among the few still functioning. As she watched the remnants of their invasion force drift helplessly through space, she made a decision that would change galactic history. All remaining vessels, she broadcast on emergency frequencies, retreat to minimum safe distance. We are withdrawing from the Sol system. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Caltharian hegemony had been forced to retreat, and across the galaxy, every species in their empire was listening. The news of the Caltharian retreat reached the Outer Rim territories within hours, carried by quantum communications that the hegemony couldn't control. For the first time in 3 millennia, conquered species heard something impossible. Their oppressors had been defeated. On the mining world of Cephalon 7, the Thraxian overseer Comdar was reviewing production quotas when his assistant burst into the command center. Sir, you need to see this immediately. The holographic display showed debris fields where the proud Caltharian fleet had once been. Human transmissions continued broadcasting from Earth, their signals growing stronger as they repaired their communications networks. This is President Jackson of the United Earth Defense Council, broadcasting to all free peoples of the galaxy. The Caltharian hegemony has been driven from our system. Their ships burn in our space. Their empire is not invincible. Freedom is possible. Comdar stared at the transmission, his 6 arms trembling. The Thraxians had been enslaved for 800 years, their warrior culture crushed under Caltharian rule. They had forgotten what it meant to fight back. But now, sir, his assistant whispered, the workers have stopped mining. They're all listening to the human broadcasts. Deep in the mines, Thraxian workers who had never known anything but slavery gathered around hidden receivers. Their ancestors' war songs, forbidden for centuries, began echoing through the tunnels. For the first time in 800 years, the Thraxians remembered what they used to be. In the Caltharian home system, Emperor Zexthon faced the greatest crisis in hegemony history. Admiral Vextara's battered ships had limped home, bringing news of impossible defeat. But worse than the military loss was the political earthquake that followed. My Lord Emperor, reported Intelligence Minister Quandal, his crystalline form flickering with nervous energy. We're detecting significant unrest in 14 outer rim systems. The human broadcasts have reached populations that submitted peacefully centuries ago. Silence them, the Emperor commanded. We've tried, my lord. But their quantum transmission methods are unprecedented. They're broadcasting on frequencies we didn't know existed, using their entire planet as a transmission array. Every attempt to jam their signals has failed. What the Caltharians didn't understand was that humanity's global communication network had evolved during the war. Earth's physicists, working in isolated bunkers while their world burned, had discovered something remarkable in the Caltharian technology they'd salvaged from destroyed ships. Dr. Elena Vasquez examined the alien quantum core in her underground laboratory. "It's not just communication," she told her team via secure link. "These crystals can transmit information instantaneously across any distance. We're talking about true quantum entanglement on a galactic scale." Her colleague in Tokyo, Professor Hiroshi Tanaka, nodded excitedly. "If we can reverse engineer this technology, we could coordinate with resistance movements across the galaxy in real time." Within weeks of the Caltharian retreat, Earth had established communication links with dozens of oppressed worlds. The messages they received painted a picture of an empire far more fragile than anyone had imagined. From the industrial world of Nexus Prime, "This is Kethara of the Zephyrian Liberation Front. We have 3 million workers ready to revolt. But we need coordinates for supply drops. From the research colony on Sigma Draconis, the Viridian Science Council has been developing weapons in secret for 50 years. We're ready to share technology with Earth and coordinate strikes. From the warrior clans of Proxima Centauri, the Centaurian tribes never truly surrendered. We've been waiting for the right moment. Give us a target." President Jackson stood in the newly constructed Orbital Command Center, watching holographic displays showing resistance movements across 43 star systems. "How many species are involved now?" General Harrison consulted his reports. "As of this morning, we have confirmed contact with 67 different species across 91 worlds. They're all asking the same thing: when do we strike back?" The answer came sooner than anyone expected. Emperor Zexthon, desperate to restore his empire's reputation, made a fatal error. Instead of treating Earth's victory as an isolated incident, he declared humanity a galactic threat and called for their complete extinction. "The human plague must be eliminated," he announced to the Hegemony Council. "Every world that has heard their message is contaminated. We will cleanse them all, starting with their homeworld." But the Emperor's cousin, Admiral Thykon, had been busy. His private meetings with disillusioned officers had grown into something approaching a shadow government within the Hegemony military. When the order came to assemble a massive fleet for Earth's destruction, Thykon was ready. "The Emperor has lost perspective," he told his co-conspirators in a secret meeting aboard his flagship. "Committing our entire navy to destroy one primitive world, while rebellion spreads throughout our empire. It's madness," Captain Velthos agreed. "Half our fleet is already dealing with uprisings. If we send our remaining ships to Earth, the outer territories will explode into open revolt." "Then we make a choice," Thykon declared. "The empire as it was, or the empire as it could be. I propose we contact these humans directly." The transmission reached Earth 3 days later, sent on frequencies that bypassed Imperial monitoring. President Jackson and his cabinet listened in amazement as a Caltharian admiral offered what seemed impossible: alliance. "I am Admiral Thykon of the 3rd Imperial Fleet," the message began. "I speak for elements within the Hegemony military who believe the current leadership has failed. The Emperor plans to send our entire remaining navy to destroy Earth. We propose instead to coordinate our forces with your resistance movements for a simultaneous strike against the Imperial core worlds." Secretary General Santos looked around the emergency council session. "It could be a trap, or it could be exactly what we need," replied Dr. Vasquez. "Our intelligence suggests the hegemony is fracturing from within. This could accelerate that process." General Harrison studied the tactical data included with Thykon's message. "He's offering us real-time intelligence on Imperial fleet movements, defensive positions, and communication protocols. If this is genuine, we could coordinate the largest rebellion in galactic history." President Jackson made the decision that would reshape the galaxy. "Send our response. We accept the alliance, but with conditions. Any Caltharian forces that join us must prove their commitment by liberating at least one enslaved world, and Admiral Thykon himself must personally lead the attack on the Imperial capital." The reply came within hours. Agreed. Operation Liberation begins in 72 hours. May we succeed where millennia of oppression have failed. Across the galaxy, resistance movements received synchronized orders through Earth's quantum communication network. The Thraxian mining world of Cephalon 7 would be liberated by Admiral Thycon's forces, while human-designed weapons were transmitted to resistance cells on 14 other worlds. On Earth, the impossible was happening again. Humanity was preparing to leave their home planet for the first time, not as explorers but as liberators. Using captured Caltharian technology and their own desperate innovation, Earth's engineers had built something unprecedented, a fleet designed specifically to free enslaved worlds. It's not about conquest, President Jackson addressed the global assembly. It's about making sure no species ever faces what we faced. No world should have to choose between slavery and extinction. The human fleet was unlike anything ever seen in galactic warfare. Each ship was built around a simple principle: maximum damage to oppressor forces, maximum protection for civilian populations. They carried weapons designed to disable rather than destroy, boarding equipment for ship capture, and most importantly, communication arrays powerful enough to coordinate with resistance movements across entire star systems. As the 72-hour countdown reached its final moments, Admiral Thycon sent one last message to Earth. Thank you for showing us what courage looks like. Win or lose, the galaxy will never be the same. The Great Liberation was about to begin. The Great Liberation began at exactly 000 Universal Time, with simultaneous attacks across 43 star systems. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Caltharian hegemony faced coordinated rebellion on a galactic scale. On Cephalon 7, Admiral Thycon's fleet emerged from hyperspace to find the mining world in open revolt. Thraxian workers had seized the orbital platforms, while their hidden weapons turned Caltharian administrative centers into smoking ruins. The Admiral's quantum message to the rebel leaders was simple: we stand with you. In the Sol system, humanity's first interstellar fleet prepared for departure. Admiral Sarah Chen, the former fighter pilot who had survived the initial invasion, now commanded Earth's flagship Indomitable Spirit. Her fleet of 27 vessels represented everything humanity had learned about warfare in their darkest hour. All ships report ready for quantum jump, her communications officer announced. Destination, Xerion System, liberation of Viridian forced labor camps. Admiral Chen thought about the path that had brought her here. 6 months ago, she had been a test pilot for experimental aircraft. Now she commanded humanity's first military expedition beyond their solar system, leading a mission to free aliens she had never met from oppression. She had only recently learned existed. Execute jump, she ordered. The human fleet vanished into quantum space, their destination a star system where millions of Viridians had labored for centuries to build Caltharian war machines. They carried with them something revolutionary, proof that the impossible was possible. On the hegemony capital world of Kalthtar, Emperor Zexthon watched the tactical displays with growing horror. Red warning lights marked rebellion in system after system, while his military commanders reported coordinated attacks unlike anything in Imperial history. How? He demanded of his remaining advisors. How are primitives coordinating attacks across half the galaxy? Intelligence Minister Quandal's crystalline form flickered with desperate energy. My lord, the humans have somehow weaponized our own quantum communication technology. They're broadcasting coordination signals that we cannot intercept or jam. Worse, they're sharing advanced tactical data with every resistance movement. The truth was more devastating than the Emperor could comprehend. Earth's physicists hadn't just reverse-engineered Caltharian quantum cores, they had improved them. Human communication arrays could now penetrate Imperial security systems, coordinate attacks in real time across galactic distances, and most dangerous of all, broadcast the one thing that could destroy the hegemony: hope. In the Xerion system, the first test of human liberation doctrine was about to begin. Admiral Chen's fleet faced a Caltharian garrison force protecting one of the Empire's largest industrial complexes. But instead of engaging in traditional ship-to-ship combat, the humans employed tactics that left their enemies bewildered. All ships, execute Tactic 7, Chen commanded. Target defensive platforms only. Avoid the factory complexes at all costs. The human fleet scattered into attack formations that prioritized precision over power. Their weapons, refined through desperate innovation during Earth's siege, were designed to disable rather than destroy. Caltharian defensive satellites went dark without exploding, their systems corrupted by quantum viruses that humans had embedded in their attack protocols. Below on Xerion's surface, Viridian workers in the factory complexes felt their electronic control collars deactivate for the first time in living memory. Jorak, the same worker who had first heard Earth's defiant broadcasts, stood in amazement as his forced labor restraints simply stopped working. "The humans kept their promise," he whispered to his fellow workers. "They came for us." The liberation of Xerion became a template for human military doctrine. Instead of conquest, they offered liberation. Instead of occupation, they provided support for self-governance. Every freed world received the same offer: join the growing alliance against oppression or simply live free. The choice was always theirs, but the most shocking development came from within the Caltharian military itself. Admiral Thycon's rebellion had spread far beyond his immediate command. On 17 different worlds, Caltharian commanders chose to stand down rather than fight liberation forces. Some simply withdrew their troops. Others actively assisted in overthrowing imperial administrators. Captain Velthos, commanding a garrison on the agricultural world of Harvest Prime, made a decision that would have been unthinkable weeks earlier. When human ships arrived to coordinate with local resistance movements, he opened communications with both sides. "This is Captain Velthos of the Imperial Garrison. We will not resist liberation efforts. However, we request safe passage for our personnel who wish to remain loyal to the Empire." The human commander, Colonel Martinez, responded immediately. "Granted. Any Caltharian personnel who wish to leave may do so without interference. Those who wish to stay and help build a free society are welcome." Half of Velthos's garrison chose to stay. The pattern repeated across liberated worlds. Many Caltharian soldiers, especially those from conquered species that had been forced into imperial service, changed sides entirely. Others simply laid down their weapons and returned home. The great empire was dissolving from within, its military choosing freedom over blind obedience. Emperor Zexthon's response was predictable: total war. He recalled every available ship to the capital system and prepared for a final offensive that would either restore imperial dominance or destroy everything in the attempt. "Prepare the core fleet," he commanded. "Every dreadnought, every battle carrier, every ship of the line. We will end this rebellion by destroying its source. Glass the human homeworld, then systematically exterminate every species that has defied us." The core fleet represented the concentrated military might of 3,000 years of galactic domination. 200 capital ships, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. Support vessels numbered in the thousands. It was a force designed to end civilizations. But as the massive fleet prepared for its final mission, something unprecedented happened. Admiral Thycon's rebellion reached the capital system itself. "My Lord Emperor," Admiral Vextara reported with barely concealed panic, "we have a problem. Admiral Thycon has returned to Calthatar space with a combined fleet of loyalist and human vessels. He's demanding immediate surrender of Imperial command structure." The Emperor's compound eyes widened in disbelief. "Impossible. He lacks the ships to challenge the core fleet." "My lord," Vextara continued reluctantly, "intelligence suggests he has support from within our own command structure. At least 30% of our capital ships may refuse orders to fire on his forces." In orbit around the Caltharian homeworld, Admiral Thycon stood on the bridge of his flagship alongside Admiral Chen of Earth's Liberation Fleet. The sight was historic. Representatives of two species that had been mortal enemies now working together to topple a galactic empire. "The core fleet is moving to intercept," reported Chen's tactical officer. 200 capital ships confirmed hostile intent. Thycon activated the quantum communication array that connected them to resistance movements across the galaxy. "All liberated worlds, all allied forces, this is Admiral Thycon. The final battle begins now. Everything we have fought for will be decided in the next few hours." The response was immediate and overwhelming. From 43 different star systems, allied fleets began quantum jumping toward the Caltharian capital. Thraxian warships, their crews singing ancient battle songs. Viridian research vessels converted into siege platforms. Zephyrian raiders armed with human-designed weapons. Centaurian tribal fleets, their ships painted with war symbols from 100 different cultures, and leading them all, the ships of Earth, vessels built by a species that had learned to fight impossible odds and win. The Battle of Kalthtar was about to begin, and with it, the final collapse of the greatest empire the galaxy had ever known. The Battle of Kalthtar began with the largest fleet engagement in galactic history. Above the Kaltharian homeworld, two philosophies of power clashed. The ancient doctrine of dominion through fear against humanity's new concept of strength through unity. Emperor Zexthon commanded his core, fleet from the massive dreadnought Eternal Throne, a ship 3 kilometers long and capable of destroying moons. Around him arrayed the accumulated might of 3 millennia, vessels that had crushed civilizations and ended species. Against them came the most unlikely alliance ever assembled. All Imperial ships, the Emperor broadcast across quantum frequencies, destroy the human fleet first. They are the source of this contamination. Once Earth's ships are eliminated, the rebels will surrender. But as the core fleet moved to engage, something impossible happened. 37 Kaltharian capital ships broke formation and moved to defend the human vessels. "This is Admiral Kexavara of the Liberator's Dawn," came the transmission. "I stand with the rebellion. The Empire dies today." Emperor Zexthon watched in horror as his own fleet fractured before the battle even began. Centuries of loyalty dissolved in moments as ship after ship declared for the rebellion. The sight of humans fighting alongside Kaltharians shattered something fundamental in Imperial psychology. If their own species could choose freedom over empire, what did that say about the hegemony's legitimacy? Admiral Chen coordinated the Allied response from the bridge of the indomitable spirit. Around her, holographic displays showed the most complex tactical situation in military history. Dozens of species, hundreds of ship designs, thousands of vessels all fighting for the same goal but with completely different capabilities. Human ships formed defensive screens around the Thraxian assault squadrons, she commanded. Viridian research vessels maintain safe distance and coordinate quantum jamming. Zephyrian raiders hit their supply lines. What made the battle unique was humanity's role as tactical coordinators. Earth ships weren't the largest or most powerful, but their communication systems allowed real-time coordination across the entire Allied fleet. For the first time, the galaxy's oppressed species could fight as one unified force. The Thraxian warships were the first to engage the Imperial line. 800 years of suppressed warrior culture exploded into action as their crews sang battle hymns while charging directly into the enemy formation. Their ships took terrible damage, but their ferocity disrupted the carefully planned Imperial battle lines. "For 8 centuries, you made us forget who we were," transmitted war leader Thorak as his damaged ship rammed a Kaltharian destroyer. "Today, we remember." The Viridian vessels hung back, their role seemingly passive, but from a safe distance they deployed the most sophisticated jamming technology ever created. Kaltharian ships suddenly found their quantum communications failing, their targeting systems corrupted, their formation coordination collapsing into chaos. The Zephyrian raiders did what they did best. They made the battle impossible to predict. Their small, fast ships darted through the conflict zone, targeting not enemy ships but their supply vessels, communication arrays, and command structures. What should have been an organized Imperial advance became a confused melee. But the decisive moment came when humanity demonstrated why they had inspired this galactic revolution. The Eternal Throne had broken through Allied lines and was closing on the indomitable spirit. Emperor Zexthon intended to end the rebellion by destroying its human leaders. The massive dreadnought's weapons began charging for a killing blow that would vaporize Admiral Chen's flagship. "All ships," Chen broadcast calmly, "execute Protocol Zero." Protocol Zero was humanity's ultimate tactical doctrine, developed during their desperate defense of Earth. When faced with impossible odds, make the impossible choice. Every human ship in the fleet, regardless of their current mission or position, immediately turned toward the Eternal Throne and accelerated to maximum velocity. The sight was stunning. 27 human vessels, each one tiny compared to the Imperial dreadnought, began coordinated ramming attacks against a ship that could destroy any one of them with a single shot. They weren't trying to win through superior firepower. They were using their own destruction as a weapon. "They're insane," reported the Eternal Throne's tactical officer. "They're all targeting our ship directly. It's suicide. Then kill them all, Emperor Zexthon commanded. But the human ships weren't simply throwing themselves away. Each vessel carried quantum cores modified with Caltharian technology, programmed to create gravitational harmonics on impact. When the first human ship, the destroyer New Harmony, struck the dreadnought's shields, it didn't just explode. It created a resonance cascade that weakened the entire defensive grid. The second impact, from the cruiser Rising Phoenix, amplified the effect. The third, fourth, and fifth impacts created feedback loops that began tearing the eternal throne apart from within. Emperor Zexthon felt his mighty flagship shuddering around him as its own gravitational systems turned destructive. Impossible. They're using our own technology against us. No, my lord, came a voice from behind him. Admiral Vextara had entered the command center, her weapon drawn. They're using their own sacrifice to defeat technology they barely understand. That's not science, that's courage. The Emperor turned to face his longtime subordinate. You dare betray me now? I'm trying to save what's left of our people, Vextara replied. The Empire is finished. But the Caltharian species doesn't have to die with it. Around them, the Eternal Throne continued to break apart as more human ships completed their suicide runs. Each impact sent gravitational shockwaves through the dreadnought structure, systematically destroying the vessel that had been the symbol of Imperial power for 1,000 years. Attention all Caltharian vessels, Admiral Vextara broadcast across the battle zone. This is Admiral Vextara, assuming emergency command of Imperial forces. The Emperor is relieved of duty. I order immediate ceasefire and withdrawal from combat. The response was immediate. Across the battle zone, Imperial ships began powering down their weapons. The great core fleet, which had seemed unstoppable hours earlier, was surrendering to forces they had been sent to destroy. But Emperor Zexthon made one final, desperate decision. As his flagship died around him, he activated the ship's quantum core overload, a weapon designed to destroy entire star systems. If he could not rule the galaxy, he would take as much of it as possible with him. If I cannot have empire, he screamed as reality began to warp around the overloading core, then I choose annihilation. The quantum detonation would have destroyed not just the Caltharian homeworld, but every ship in the system, and potentially destabilized hyperspace routes across the local galactic region. Billions would die, including every member of the Liberation Alliance. But humanity had faced extinction before. Admiral Chen, her ship crippled but still functional, made the same choice her species had made when the Caltharians first arrived: sacrifice everything to protect others. This is Admiral Chen to all ships, she transmitted as she guided the indomitable spirit directly toward the overloading quantum core. Execute Final Protocol 0. Ram the core breach. Contain the explosion. Every human ship still capable of movement followed her lead. They positioned themselves around the Eternal Throne's quantum core, their hulls forming a containment barrier. When the explosion came, it would be focused inward, destroying the human fleet but saving everyone else. Thank you, transmitted Admiral Thykon as he watched humanity prepare for one final sacrifice. Thank you for showing us what freedom means. The quantum core exploded with the force of a small star. The human fleet vanished in the blast, their ships consumed by energies that rewrote local space-time. But their sacrifice contained the explosion, preventing a catastrophe that would have ended the liberation before it could succeed. When the energy dissipated, the Eternal Throne was gone. Emperor Zexthon was dead, and the Caltharian hegemony, after 3,000 years of galactic dominance, had finally fallen. But the cost had been devastating. Humanity's first interstellar fleet was gone, their bravest leaders dead. Earth would mourn heroes who had traveled across the galaxy to die for people they had never met. In the silence that followed, Admiral Vextara's voice carried across the quantum frequencies. The war is over. The hegemony is dissolved. All worlds are free. 5 years after the Battle of Calth-Tar, the galaxy was unrecognizable. Where once a single empire had dominated 47 star systems, now dozens of free worlds governed themselves according to their own cultures and values. The transformation had not been without challenges, but something remarkable had emerged from the ashes of the hegemony. On Earth, President Jackson stood in the memorial garden overlooking the ruins of what had once been New York City. The scars of the Caltharian invasion remained visible, but new growth surrounded them. Humanity had chosen to rebuild around their wounds rather than erase them, creating monuments to resilience rather than symbols of victory. The Centaurian delegation has arrived, his aide reported. They're requesting permission to land at the memorial site. Jackson nodded. Today marked the 5th anniversary of humanity's sacrifice at Kalthtar, and representatives from every liberated world had come to Earth to participate in the remembrance ceremony. It had become an annual tradition, a reminder of the cost of freedom and the value of unity. In the years since the hegemony's fall, humanity had surprised the galaxy once again, not through warfare but through their approach to peace. Earth had become the de facto diplomatic center for the new galactic community, not because they demanded leadership, but because they consistently chose cooperation over dominance. Dr. Elena Vasquez, now Earth's chief scientific advisor, worked in laboratories that had been rebuilt with technology shared freely among the liberated worlds. Viridian quantum science, Thraxian metallurgy, Zephyrian navigation systems, and human innovation combined to create wonders that no single species could have achieved alone. The new communication array is ready for testing, she reported to the Global Council. With improvements from 14 different species, we can now coordinate real-time across the entire galactic arm. No world will ever face oppression alone again. The technology was impressive, but the philosophy behind it was revolutionary. Instead of using advanced communications for conquest or control, the galactic community had created a network designed to prevent the rise of another empire. Any world-facing threat could instantly summon aid from allies across the galaxy. On Xerion, the former Kaltharian industrial world, Jorak had become an unlikely ambassador. The Viridian worker who had first heard Earth's defiant broadcasts now helped coordinate reconstruction efforts across former hegemony territories. His factory, once a symbol of oppression, had been converted into a cultural center where species from across the galaxy came to share knowledge and art. The humans taught us something profound, he told a gathering of young beings from dozens of different worlds. They showed us that strength isn't about dominating others. It's about standing up for what's right even when the odds seem impossible. The lesson had taken root throughout the galaxy. The liberated worlds had formed what they called the Cooperative Alliance, a loose confederation based on mutual aid rather than centralized authority. Each world governed itself, but all stood ready to defend each other's freedom. Admiral Thykon, now the coordinator of galactic defense, maintained fleets that existed for a single purpose, ensuring no species would ever again face the choice between slavery and extinction. The ships he commanded included vessels from every member world, crewed by volunteers who had sworn the same oath, never again. But perhaps the most remarkable transformation had occurred among the Kaltharians themselves. Admiral Vextara, who had ended the war by deposing Emperor Zexthan, now led her people through their own liberation. The former imperial species had discovered something they had forgotten during 3 millennia of dominance, what it meant to be equals rather than rulers. We were slaves too, she often said in her speeches to Kaltharian youth. Slaves to the idea that power over others was strength. The humans freed us from that delusion when they freed everyone else. Kalthtar, the former imperial capital, had become a center for reconciliation and healing. Former slave species worked alongside reformed Kaltharians to build institutions dedicated to preventing future oppression. The planet's great military academies had been converted into universities, where beings from across the galaxy studied conflict resolution, cultural exchange, and cooperative governance. On this anniversary of the Battle of Kalthtar, representatives from 93 different worlds gathered in Earth's Memorial Garden. The ceremony was simple but profound. A reading of names. Every being who had died in the liberation wars, from human pilots who had sacrificed themselves above Earth, to Thraxian warriors who had sung battle hymns as they died for freedom. President Jackson spoke for humanity. His words carried across the galaxy by the quantum communication network that now linked all free worlds. 5 years ago, our species faced a choice that no one should ever have to make. We chose death over slavery not because we wanted to die, but because we believed freedom was worth any price. We were wrong about one thing. We thought we were choosing to die alone. Instead, we discovered we were choosing to live together. The galaxy had learned humanity's greatest lesson. That true strength came not from the ability to dominate others, but from the willingness to sacrifice for others' freedom. It was a philosophy that had transformed not just human civilization, but galactic civilization itself. As the ceremony concluded, children from dozens of species played together in the memorial gardens, their games a mixture of customs from across the galaxy. They spoke a new language that had emerged naturally, a blend of words and concepts from every liberated world, a linguistic symbol of unity and diversity. Above them, ships from the Cooperative Alliance maintained their eternal vigil, ensuring that the galaxy would never again know the shadow of empire. They were crewed by beings who remembered the old tyranny and had sworn to prevent its return. And in the deepest archives of Earth, carefully preserved, were the original radio transmissions from those desperate days when humanity had faced extinction. The words that had started a galactic revolution: "We are humanity and we do not surrender." Those words had become more than a battle cry. They had become a promise. A promise that freedom, once won, would never again be surrendered. A promise that no world would face oppression alone. A promise that the galaxy belonged not to empires but to all the free peoples who called it home. The Caltharian hegemony was dead. Their empire had burned, their fleets were shattered, and humanity had shown no pity, because sometimes the greatest mercy is refusing to show mercy to oppression itself. In its place had risen something unprecedented in galactic history. A civilization based not on the dominance of the strong over the weak, but on the protection of the weak by the strong. It was imperfect, sometimes chaotic, often inefficient compared to imperial rule. But it was free. And in the end, that made all the difference.